Muslims have convinced themselves that the only reason that non-Islamic societies have better medicine, science, and technology, and brace yourself, this is going to be kind of funny, because they believe that Western scientists rehashed scientific discoveries made by some men who lived in Baghdad 1,200 years ago. As absurd as this sounds, it only gets worse. They also believe that the Islamic Renaissance happened because the scientists read the Quran, and that was it. Many Muslims, namely Zakir Naik, literally believe that the ancient Greeks, Romans, Indians, and Syrians made absolutely no contribution whatsoever to the Islamic Enlightenment in Baghdad. You may wonder, why this is relevant to all of this, but, be patient with me, I'm going to get to it. Muslims give the Quran and Islam 100% credit for the Islamic Enlightenment. And when I say everything, I mean everything. This would be kind of equivalent to saying that a Christian scientist discovered a new protein because they read about it in the Bible, and it's kind of like saying that Japanese biologists who make new discoveries first read about it in some Shinto scriptures. Muslim people who believe the Islamic Renaissance happened because many of the ancient scientists just so happen to be Muslim literally have no idea how scientific knowledge is created in the first place. Their attitude does not give fair credit to their own ancient scholars who worked tirelessly learning from others, translating books, adding their own knowledge, and inventing new ideas. The fact is that Islam had very little to do with the Islamic Renaissance, because Renaissances happen because people get together and learn from each other and share ideas. It's not because many of the Muslims back then just so happened to be Muslim. It's about something important that was going on during that 300-year period. So now let's step back into the modern times. When we ask a Muslim, why aren't Muslims making any contributions to modern science? Pay very close attention and you will find that their rebuttals are full of religious mumbo-jumbo. For example, an Islamic charlatan will actually get on television and tell the whole world that an imam discovered the cure for AIDS. And they will explain that the cure for AIDS comes from some hadith about a bacteria on a wing's fly. Or, for example, they will get on television and tell the whole world that American astronaut Neil Armstrong went up into outer space and discovered that energy radiates from Mecca, and there's some vast Western conspiracy covering it all up. Within these stories that they tell, what we really see is a much bigger story. We know that there's no cure for AIDS. We know that energy does not radiate from Mecca. What we do know is that Muslims attempt to legitimize Islam by speaking to the sensibilities of modern Muslim people, by placing Islam between modern science and the ancient text, the Quran. So within the stories that Muslims tell, we see that they attempt to legitimize Islam with science without earning any of that science themselves. And we also see that they appear to feel humiliated by the West. Islamic charlatans reiterate dried-up lies that infidels have better science simply because we stole it or rehashed it from Muslim men who died 1,200 years ago. They believe that the West steals everything from ancient Muslim scholars. Now, within this lie that they tell themselves, the charlatans have created a win-win situation where Islam can never lose. So no matter how much the Islamic mentality hurts Muslims, in their brain, Islam can never be under the West because Islam somehow gets credit for everything. So eventually, there is no need for Muslim people to make any contributions to modern science, medicine, or medical technology because 1,100 years ago, some dude in Baghdad invented a better way of making glass. Now, how is this relevant today? Well, I've already proven how this is relevant, but what I'd like you to do right now is to take a look at the image. This is taken from the TIMSS International Math and Science scores. The average test score for 8th grade children from Japan, Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taipei is 586. American and European children average 487. The average test scores for 8th grade children from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Palestine, and Syria is 350. 8th grade children from Qatar scored the worst with 307 in mathematics. Now, what these test scores prove is that even from wealthy families, Muslim children are behind the rest of the world. This is what happens when parents care more about their child's religious indoctrination than their child's education in science. The reason that children in secular nations perform much better in math and science is not because we're more intelligent, it's simply because in our countries, we don't spend 30% of our class time in religious studies and teaching children how to pray and how to wash themselves before prayer and all that other silly mumbo-jumbo. If you're not convinced yet, go to the Nobel Prize website linked in the video description box. Women and men, black, white, Asian, and Hispanic from all over the world for the last 100 years have won the Nobel Prize in physics, chemistry, anatomy, and physiology. As Muslim people claim to be 1.5 billion in number, not one single Muslim has ever won the Nobel Prize in science. Ever. And I mean ever. And I invite anybody to go to that database and look through it. And what's really ironic here is that the Quran says that women are intellectually inferior to men, yet women consistently win the Nobel Prize in anatomy, chemistry, and the biological sciences left and right. The problem here is that the Islamic mentality is one that looks backwards in time. They're consumed with Muhammad and consumed with his wives and consumed with his companions and transmitting stories of their lives, etc., etc., etc. And it goes on and on and on. They look back to the past as the golden age, and they don't look to the future. This is why they are not doing as well as they should. The problem with this 1.5 billion people is how Islam shapes how they choose to spend their time. When people spend their time praying 5 times a day, performing 5 daily ritualistic washings, spend time reading the Quran, spend time reading Hadith, spend time reading the Sunnah, spend all their time just focusing on looking back at the traditions, they are not spending their time in math and science classrooms. And that right there is exactly how Islam is harmful to humanity.